All right, welcome to the Lead Generation World Podcast. My name is Mike Faree. Thanks for joining me today. We got a really great show for you. We got John Challis, who's been in the industry for almost 20 years and worked at a number of the major lead generation companies within the mortgage industry. So it'll be great to catch up with him and talk a little shop and talk about his experience within the industry. But before we do, I do want to thank our sponsor, Leadspedia. Leadspedia is a great supporter of Lead Generation World, the podcast, and then, of course, our conference. So thank you. If you want more information about distribution, call tracking, and routing platform, you can go to that's leadspedia.com. So thank you for the support, guys. On that note, I do want to also mention that we have Lead Generation World Denver, January. It's going to be taking place January 17th through the 19th. 2021. Registration is open right now. Early bird pricing is $495. Really, really affordable. So you don't want to miss this opportunity to get a registration pass at a low price. And let me remind you, all the registrations are 100% fully guaranteed, meaning if the show doesn't take place, if it gets postponed, you can't make it, whatever the case may be, you need a refund, we'll go ahead and take care of that for you. No questions asked. We can also credit you to a future event, or we can change it over to a colleague. So there is absolutely no risk in taking advantage of the early bird pricing now. In fact, I'm going to give you my cell phone number. If you guys text me just 100, just so I know what you're talking about, I'll shoot you back a code that will give you an additional $100 off. So it'll lower the price to $395. And I don't think anybody can argue that that's not an amazing deal. So here's my cell. It's 503-749-9990. So that's 503-79990. Text me with just 100, like I said, so I know what you're talking about, and I'll shoot you back with a code, and you'll get it for $395. Take advantage of this, folks. It's super affordable for what you get at the show with the value. We've got so many cool things planned, assuming it can take place. It's going to be a really, really great show. And considering the fact that there hasn't been a conference since Lead Generation World January, it's really shaping up to be sort of a homecoming of sorts. And I know people are really, really eager to get have some human connection within the industry. So I'm looking forward to it. Fingers crossed, folks. Say a prayer that we can all get together in January. So without further ado, let's go ahead and bring John in and start talking a little shop. All right, welcome everyone to the Lead Generation World Podcast. I've got old industry friend John Challis joining me today. What's up, John?
How are you? Good to connect.
It's good finally to get you on here and just talk shop. It's funny because a lot of times when I bring people on there, they're like, "Okay, can you send me a list of questions that we're going to talk about?" And that's just not how I do it. I like to have more of a conversation thing, but you didn't even hesitate. You're like, yeah, let's do it. What do we, no questions asked.
I figured if anything, given how long we've known one another, it'd be, we'd have to pare down the conversation more than stretch it out. So that didn't really worry me.
Yeah, exactly. So we first met when you were, I'm not sure if you were at Lower My Bills or you had moved on to Lead Point, but I was.
I think I was at Lead Point.
I was looking through your, LinkedIn, just kind of looking over it all, and man, you've got it's like multiple lead gen lives you've lived. You started out at Lower My Bills, Lead Point, then went over to the buy side and then Lending Tree. I kind of want to hear a little bit because your first entry into Legion was Lower My Bills, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And you went to USC, so Lower My Bills was in LA. How did that come about?
It was just luck, right place, right time. I had been in sales for a little while at that point, and actually was unemployed because my most recent job prior to Lower My Bills, I was selling IT consulting to Fortune 500 companies right as the .com bubble burst. So, these companies went from having endless IT budgets to absolutely no money. I got laid off 2 weeks before my wedding and spent the first 7 months of my marriage unemployed. And which, I don't think terribly impressed my in-laws at the time. Um, but very fortunately, my wife had a very good friend who ran PR for Lower My Bills, and they were hiring sales reps, and she got me in the door with an interview.
Did you
So
meet your wife at USC?
I didn't know. We met in LA. She's a East Coaster, which is why we're back out here. Long story
Yeah.
later. She's a Florida State grad, actually, but we both lived a couple blocks away from one another in Hermosa Beach at that time.
Got it. Got it. Got it. Okay. So, 2003 is when you started at Lower My Bills,
Yeah.
which was, I mean, pretty early on. I don't know what year was Lower My Bills founded?
I think it was 99.
Was it?
So, but it was originally founded as more of a, their at first when I joined on, their biggest product was telecommunications. So comparing long distance carriers, which,
Yeah.
it's hard to believe these days since that doesn't even exist anymore. But there was one really, really smart VP in the company that saw what LendingTree was doing, and they said, you know what, we should also compare mortgage lenders.
Yeah. So, 2003 comes around. That's mortgage buildup was sort of starting to happen, right?
Yeah,
What was it
yeah.
like selling leads to mortgage guys? Were they still and like being faxed, or what was
Oh
Lower
yeah.
My Bills doing back then?
Yeah, no, we were faxing and emailing leads. I was getting, a stack of returns via fax on a weekly basis that I had to manually count up and, attribute to each of my correct partners and, tally this in and then invoice them accordingly. I mean, this was definitely the early days. It was pretty crazy.
So, I mean, obviously people understood leads and all this sort of stuff, but going out and selling these things, I mean, what was it? I'm just kind of curious what when you look at back in obviously LendingTree was one of the first to sort of do this, but Lower My
Right.
Bills was right behind it. What was it? I'm just kind of curious about what the culture was like. I mean, was it like, hey, we're doing something innovative here? Was it, hey, we're hustling? I'm just kind of curious what Lower My Bills felt like in 2003, 2004,
Yeah, it was Lower My Bills in those days was one of those situations, one of those I wish I knew then what I knew
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
The leadership was off the charts great, and the from the CEO down. I know Matt Coffin a little bit. I mean, I haven't talked to Matt in years, but one of the things that I was always impressed with by Matt was who obviously was unbelievably smart himself, but he was one of those fearless leaders who was never afraid to surround himself with people that were smarter than him in those certain areas. And he did an exemplary job of that. And then the sales leadership that they hired, gentleman by the name of Don Lavoy. I don't know if you remember
Yeah.
Don at all back in the day, but he was one of those gentlemen. He'd already been super successful in his life, and he was certainly not adverse to great economic opportunities, of course, but he was also there to help build and develop great salespeople and great professionals. And so I was a young guy. I was late 20s or early 30s, and still greatly developing and learning my corporate career. And I just had an opportunity to learn from some giants.
Yeah. And then, I mean, and from Lower My Bills, you went on Lead Point, which was also relatively innovative too, right? I mean, Lead Point, I, I, I had made the claim, and I don't know if this is accurate or not, but I thought they were one of the first lead exchanges in the
Yeah.
marketplace. I'm not sure.
No, I think they were. I mean, back then there was two, Root and Lead
Yeah.
Point. Lead Point was the one that survived, but yeah, their
Well, I
technology
think, well, what Root came after though, Lead Point, didn't they? Or was it?
a little bit after, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But they had some big names behind them as well. The original VC firm that was backing Lead Point at the time also had a great pedigree, and don't ask me what they were because that was way too long ago to
Yeah.
remember. I
Yeah.
remember it was impressive. But yeah, their technology was spectacular.
Um,
Probably still is. I mean, they're still around. I don't want to intimate that it's not.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, no, they're still doing their thing, and I think
Great. And some
successful
of
as
my former, Lower My Bills coworkers, one of my Lower My Bills mentors is running sales there. So it's, just like everybody else in this industry, right? It's a little bit incestuous.
yeah. No, well, no doubt. I mean, it's one of those industries that is pretty small when it comes to the industry players, I guess.
Yeah.
The people that are really involved from a day-to-day standpoint seem to bounce around. But I think that's mainly because, and we'll kind of, this will show itself basically in your own career, is that it is very niche, right? I'm understanding how leads are generated, the relationships, and you get to lead point. I mean, you're at Lower My Bills, and they're doing nothing but display ads for the most part. A lot of display,
Right.
a lot of paid
Right.
media. But then you jump to a company that's really not doing anything, no marketing, right? I mean, it's
Right.
maybe
Yeah.
no, maybe
Nothing to their brand.
that's yeah, maybe that's too absolute, but it's an exchange where other lead generators come and sell the leads, and that sort of thing. So that's completely a different animal, I would,
Yeah.
to some extent.
Yeah, I mean, and keep in mind too, one of the co-founders of Lead Point was also the guy who started Commission Junction, so he was very familiar with
Yeah,
that space. And, yeah,
Per
Yep,
Peterson,
person.
yeah.
Yep. Yes.
Um, yeah, no, and so seeing that, and then seeing how affiliates relationships work, which is similar to how that is. It's when people have that sort of experience and can see those mechanics working, they can go and apply it in other places, and you just don't get that from a traditional marketing role, right?
Yeah, I mean, let's face it. Flash forward almost 20 years, and my wife still doesn't really understand what I do. So.
Yeah, exactly. What you go back to the the one example is people always ask, well, what do you is lead generation? Well, you go back to Lending Tree. Well, Lending Tree, right? Or this company.
Yep.
They're not a bank,
Right.
they're a marketing company. That's basically lead gen.
Right.
Um, but in 2005 to 2007, you're at Lead Point, but around that time, it's funny because I was just doing a search. I did a quick Google. I always do a quick Google search for guests and just to see what I come up with. But one of the funny things that pops up is, which is still live, which is the Leeds 2007 event that Bill Rice put on,
Oh
and
yeah.
yeah, that you spoke at. And let me just see if I'll pull it up here. And you spoke. Do you remember your topic?
I I mean, it was.
No.
I think it was about exchanges, wasn't it?
It
About
was no, well, it could
the
be. It could
evolution
be.
of lead gen.
Yeah, the title was Innovations in Lead Generation.
Okay.
What do you what do you think you talked about in 2007 about innovations in lead gen? I
I
mean,
mean, I remember one of the slides that I developed that I put together was kind of a timeline of, of the evolution of lead generation up to that point. I don't remember the specifics of the
yeah.
timeline, but I do remember a lot of people want after that. Well, a lot of people. I mean, there were only 80 or so at that conference, right? But some people asking for that slide afterwards. So I guess it wasn't a horrible one.
No, I mean, it's funny because, like I said, going through the agenda here, and this is the irony, right? In sort of the innovations of lead gen. I look at the agenda here, and you could literally copy and paste this into a agenda at Lead Generation World
Right.
or LeadsCon or wherever. It's the same topics, and I one of the things that I was thinking about when I knew you were coming on today was really asking you what, if anything, has innovated since 2003, aside from maybe the fax and delivery
Right.
of leads. I mean, what's changed? From a
Well,
let's just talk
that's,
about from a lead gen standpoint, not just the closing of leads, but the actual creation of leads. I mean, it all seems relatively the same, right?
yeah. I mean, the process, I say this all the time, the process isn't overly complicated. You drive a consumer to a form, and expect them to fill out a form at a rate with enough intent to transact, and whatever that transaction is going to be, requesting some sort of quote, or buying something online, and doing that at enough of a rate that the math works out to you come in below your target acquisition costs. It's so to that end, it hasn't changed. I think what's changed is probably just the overall intent. I mean, way back then in Lower My Bills world, lead generation was new, and lead generation via internet advertising was new. So I believe, this is just a guess, nothing scientific behind this, but I would assume that the people that filled out those forms back then probably had a little bit more intent than they did now, because that process was new. Nowadays, we're bombarded with offers, we're bombarded with lead generation efforts, and so it's probably a lot harder nowadays to generate the same volume of leads with the same intent. It also didn't hurt either that way back then interest rates were at worldwide, all-time historic lows, and we know now why that was, because they were giving money away to people who probably didn't deserve to have the money, and everybody was getting rich off of that. But nonetheless, I think that's probably the big difference, is just this was all new to consumers back then, so it was a different level of intent, And to your point too, the big difference is that all the technology that's come in and around lead generation. I mean, it's a big multi-billion dollar a year business. I mean, LendingTree alone is now up to what, 2-3 billion in valuation. So the whole industry back then was just a few hundred million. So the technology and lead management and all of the layers that have been built on top of leads to extract more value than as much value as you can out of those inquiries. That's hugely different. It's an industry in and of itself.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a couple of things that I while digging around too, I picked up was, some of the topics were lead scoring, and then hot transfers, were the two sort of big things, right? And the third thing was sharing data, right? Buyers, which is still a conversation today. It's always a talking point between buyers and sellers, but the big thing was lead scoring.
Yeah, I've never seen it work. I know a lot of companies do it, but I've never, and some of the companies that I've been with in the past have tried their hands at and spent a lot of money to try and build out some way to add a predictive model to that lead, so that when it comes in, you're scoring it as a propensity to transact. But I mean, in my experience, the best indicator of intent is media type, and by that I mean Google stuff. SEM is always going to convert better than display and social. Those display ads, social ads, those are just predominantly tire kickers. It's just the nature of the media. But of course, somebody who proactively goes and does a branded or non-branded keyword search within whatever industry, and initiates that search, and then finds a brand or finds an aggregator and fills out a form, that's just a consumer that has a lot more intent. And I don't think you need to spend hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars to figure out a predictive model that a Google search is gonna convert at a higher rate than a Facebook lead.
That's an interesting point. And so one of the things that that people may start running through their head is, okay, well, maybe I shouldn't focus on all those other channels, and I just focus on high intent channels. But then you quickly realize that, one, it's maybe pretty expensive. Two, there's a certain ceiling to the scalability of some of those channels, those keywords, whatever it is.
Right.
What then? What do you do then?
Then it's just managing a portfolio. You know, I mean, your investment portfolio has varying levels of risk based on your age and based on how conservative or not conservative you are, and you just try and reach that balance. Well, marketing, lead generation is the same thing. I mean, if you can, in a cost-effective way, meet your entire lead generation capacity via SEM, then you're golden. But odds are that can't happen. It's either too expensive or there's just not the volume that you need to achieve your goals. So you have to mix in these lower intent channels and just kind of understand, all right, if I go too heavy on Facebook, my overall acquisition cost goes up to here, and that's 20% higher than I need. So, Facebook can only represent X percentage of my total media mix. And, that way I can hit the volume that I need and still remain at or below the acquisition costs that I need. But it's just managing that portfolio.
Yeah. So I was looking at Wayback Machine or whatever, where you can look up historical sort of screenshots of websites. And I was
Right.
looking at leadcritic.com, and one of the articles, I think it was in 2009, was about LendingTree, a company
Yeah.
that you worked for a number of years, I think almost 6 years.
Yeah.
And they had in 2009, I think their Q1 was, they lost 500, I think $30 million in a quarter.
Yeah.
And I think it was after, I think 2009 is around everything was starting to hit the fan with mortgage and all
Right.
that sorts of stuff. But fast forward to, I don't know, 2011 or so, a couple years removed from that, they started to make a rebound. But from my 20,000 foot view of LendingTree, they traditionally did traditional marketing, right? It was TV, it
Right.
was mainly TV, it was radio, it was that sort of stuff. Um, but that has scale and that's expensive. But you worked with them on sort of diversifying a little bit, right?
Yeah. Definitely. I mean, traditionally, so I came in at 2011, like you said, went to work for another mentor and former Lower My Bills coworker, Bruce Cook,
Yeah.
legendary Bruce Cook, and he brought me on to kind of help stand up performance marketing channel, because Lending Tree really had traditionally just relied upon their brand and relied upon their direct marketing spend. And it's interesting to kind of think of this historically, but this was a time when, to your point, yeah, they were losing a lot of money, largely because of Lending Tree loans. They were still had the origination arm,
Yep.
and so this was amidst the tail end of the mortgage crisis, and so they were that was kind of pulling them down a little bit. And interestingly, at that time, Quinn Street, another company that I worked for a few years, was actually doing really, really well. They'd just gone public, and were still growing. And they were probably larger than Lending Tree was at that time. And Quinn Street has always been based almost entirely on performance marketing. And so I think that might have been, and it's not like anybody at Lending Tree told me this. This was always just kind of the opinion that I arrived at during my time there. But yeah, they saw the success that Quinn Street was having, and thought, well, hey, if they're doing that much revenue off of that type of marketing, then we obviously have to get in on it as well. So I got to come in. I mean, they'd always had a CJ, Commission Junction account, and had some affiliates, but it was always a piece of their business that they just kept throwing around to one person to the next. They never really focused a great deal of attention on affiliates or those types of publisher relationships.
Yeah, and I wanted to talk, I mean, because I wanted to mention Quinn Street, but just kind of continue, because I mean, you've been at, I think, the top four, like some of the top
Yeah.
lead gen brands around, but they're all different. That's what's interesting about it. When I look at it, I look at Lower My Bills, and they went through that sort of display area. It was very early on. Then Lead Point was more of a tech company, and then Quinn Street, was more affiliate based, I would say. I don't know, and direct marketing or performance marketing based, and then Lending Tree, which was brand, and then switched over. So it's just really interesting to see all the different companies that you've touched to some extent. But I'm kind of curious, going back to Lending Tree, without really, I don't think talking anything too much inside baseball or anything, but um, what was that like? I mean, what was it with a feeling like going to a company that was, okay, we're starting something new, and in some regard, I would guess that there was an opinion that this was the dirty, side. We're brand people, we do TV, but you over there doing your affiliate marketing stuff. What was that kind of feeling, or was it more of a team? What was that non-existent, that sort of feeling?
No, I mean, I definitely always joked around that, and forgive, this is not the greatest of analogies, so I hope not to offend anybody, but we were the redheaded stepchild of Lending Tree marketing. Now, I always remember too, one of my favorite
That
hires.
one redheaded stepchild listening is pissed right now.
I know. Well, one of my favorite people that I got to take part in hiring at Lending Tree. I remember saying, redhead, that setting right expectations during the interview process, that, heads up, performance marketing is the redheaded stepchild. And she wasn't a stepchild, but I did realize immediately on saying that, wait, she's got red hair, and I felt like a total ass. Luckily,
That's
she
funny.
was fantastic, and didn't hate me for that. I'm sure she probably grew to hate
Other
me.
other things.
No, it definitely, they preferred to get the majority of their marketing internally from brand. And it makes sense too, right? It's a phenomenal brand name, and has always been, and will continue to be. I mean, even back then when the company was in a little bit of trouble, the overall brand awareness was right up there with, the national banks, and people just knew who Lending, because they had such a great when banks compete you win campaign early on, that really just, cemented them into the general public, not just financial services as an industry, or a vertical. So it was definitely their preference to generate as much as possible internally. But, they had to kind of come to grips with the fact that sometimes you can actually acquire that more media, or media more cost effectively, by going through third parties. And even as big of a brand as Lending Tree is and was back then, there just happens to be networks, agencies, publishers, people that have been doing this for years. And it also, Lending Tree's in a better spot now than they were back then, just because they are now so much more fully diversified in products, because back then it was still just refi. It was 85-95% refi. So I had these publishers that they didn't care what offer was, what ad unit was in the ad units that they had access to. They're pre-buying these things like, Lower My Bills used to back in the day, many months and quarters in advance, to get really, really discounted rates. And they can just throw a health and beauty ad in there, an insurance ad in there. I mean, they're product agnostic. So they genuinely actually had better buying power than even a Lending Tree did back then. So I could pay them their cut. We would get our conversion rates, and there were many instances where my margins were still better than internal direct buys for the same types of media. Now, I'm sure things are very different now, and I certainly wouldn't make any guesses, but yeah, it was great, because this was my entree to the marketing side. As you said, I'd always just kind of I'd either been on the lead generation side, actually selling the leads, or I worked a short time for a lender running their marketing and actually buying the leads. So this was my first time on this side of the table. And man, how could you come up with a better brand and marketplace to learn than that?
Yeah, and I imagine you really learned going back to the product mix, and that balance, that marketing portfolio balance, and really tweaking what that is. Because at one point you said some of the brand stuff had lower margins, but there's also a quality that comes from that as well, that more expensive
Yeah,
that we talked about, and
yeah,
and vice versa. Not saying that partnership, leads coming from partners aren't good quality. I'm not saying that, but there's certainly a little divergence between the quality of the two channels, or the
sure.
different channels. So then balancing that a little bit. Um, I'm sure you got a really good, front seat to how to balance expensive traffic versus less expensive traffic and remaining a good quality channel.
Yeah. Yeah, it was exactly that. I had to manage my own portfolio. So I had some partnerships that were SEM driven, either non-branded or branded. And, Lending Tree was one of the most open-minded, I guess, one of the most liberal companies that I've worked for with their brand. They actually did
Lending
allow,
Tree?
yeah, at the
Wow.
time at least,
Yeah,
they
yeah.
did allow the use of their brand in certain keyword buys. Now I had to contractually limit them to positions below us, obviously,
Yeah.
but they were more defensive about some non-brand keywords that they did really, really well with. Like mortgage calculator, I remember was a huge one for them back then. So maybe it is still now. And so those were the ones that my partners couldn't bid on, but yeah, so it was great. I got to, and that was the other thing that Lending Tree did exceptionally well, and I'm sure still does, is really got at the back end success data of the leads so that we all optimized our campaigns based on that intent. It wasn't based on necessarily Lending Tree's margins, although of course that factored into the marketing mix for all of us that ran a channel as well. But the biggest component was how successful are these leads for the lenders that are buying the leads, because they understood exceptionally well that, hey, if we're coming in well below acquisition costs because the conversion rates are so high. If it's a $800 cost per funded loan, for example, and we're coming in at 650, then we can actually increase the cost per lead, and go out and buy more of that media and generate more volume and drive that to the customers. And it's always a tough conversation to have. Obviously, lenders would love that, rather have volume at that 650 than 800. But at the end of the day, if they can function real well at 800 and we can drive them more scale at 800, then, if they're getting 20% more originations at 800 than they would at 650, then that's a no-brainer.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a tough one to swallow sometimes, for buyers. Like, can I get more? Am I going to get more leads from it, or the quality going to go down? What, all that sort of stuff once you start rating. And that's why so many don't like to share data, right? They're like, well,
Yeah.
they're just going to raise their prices on me, and maybe they are, and maybe
Right.
that's a good thing. And maybe you get more of the good stuff. I'm kind of, I envision sort of a thrill to that position, and maybe it's similar to what you're doing now, in that, you come in to probably dozens and dozens of different campaigns on a morning basis, and some, I remember, at least in my past, there'll be some like you come in and, oh shit, what happened overnight? Something
Oh, yeah.
with the campaign happened, and you're putting out a fire, and
Oh, yeah.
and so the ups and downs of managing stuff is like a stock market, a day trader or something like that.
Well, yeah, because it's an extremely bipolar industry, because when it comes to affiliates, there's only two types of affiliates. There's good ones and there's bad ones. And there is no middle ground. There's no gray. They're either really good, trustworthy companies that want to make $1 a day for the rest of their lives, or they're the black hat, deceptive, fraud-driven companies that want to make $10 a day for the next 30 days and then bail, change their company name, and go start somewhere else to try and do it again. So yeah,
So
it
what
was.
was your testing process then? I mean, when you're bringing in companies, and maybe it's the same, it's not probably the same now. I mean, how short a leash, and what do you sort of look for? I mean, is it just kind of explain how do you approach that whole problem?
Well, you know what? I think I got to give credit to you now that I think about it, because way back when you and I had a conversation around lead technology, fraud technology in kind of real time, and you introduced me to one company, and I ended up going with another one just because I think the contracting process was easier. But yeah, it was just latching on to technology that could detect fraud. They looked for bots, they looked for patterns, because with lead fraud, there's really just two kinds. There's some sort of automated process that that is generating these leads, and the problem is most of that fraud's off of real consumer data, right? They're buying real consumer data off the dark web, or some security breaches way back in the day. So they're using real consumer information to fill in lead forms, or they're paying some overseas call center with really inexpensive labor to manually key this stuff in. But regardless, there's patterns that come from that. It's coming from the same computers or the same IP addresses. There's all types of computer forensics that make up a lead submit that I had no idea about way back then. But so I latched on to one of those companies. In fact, they were called Forensics. They've rebranded now, I think, because they were purchased by
Impact. Yeah.
Exactly. And props to David Senderoff, the CEO there, because man, he made me look smart month in and month out, because I could identify fraud immediately. It would raise all these literal red flag alerts and let me know what was going on. And I'd get texts to my phone if it happened over the weekend, because that happens a lot of times. Affiliates will try and cram volume down your throat over the weekend because you're off, you're on the weekend, and so I was always able to catch this stuff relatively quickly, pretty quickly, and I just built language into the agreements that if I detect fraud, I'm not going to pay you for it. And what ends up happening over time is, as these black hat affiliates keep trying to come back to you with a different company name month in and month out, and they realize this pattern of, oh, I'm never going to get paid by this company, then they stop coming. And it really got to the point where those first 2 years was fighting fraud day in and day out. But the last few years, it was a very rare and seldom problem, because LendingTree at that point had been able to build up a good reputation that they're going to catch this crap right away and you're not going to get paid for it.
Yeah, it's crazy. So do you, having been through all that, from the on the lead sell side and lead generation side, marketing side, now you're working with Frontpoint, driving a lot of their same type, similar campaigns, right? For Frontpoint. Do you believe in buying leads?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think lead generation is an invaluable piece of business, but it definitely is the world is changing. I mean, you used to buy a lead, and then if you're the first company to call on that lead, you probably got the deal. But now you're dealing with a situation where you get a lead and you call that lead, and they're not going to answer the phone because it says spam on the phone. I mean, so it's a very, very different world now, where the way that companies and brands, mine included, Frontpoint, we're a DIY home security provider. You have to transact very differently. It's a lot of times it's SMS and chat driven, where you can have multiple conversations with this consumer, and it could very well be a situation where the first time you actually speak to that consumer is when they buy, because you've been chatting back and forth, questions and answers leading up to that. And so, yeah, consumers engage with brands so differently these days. So lead generation is still valuable, but only if you're adapting to the communication styles that consumers have now.
Yeah. So with Frontpoint, are you primarily working with affiliate partnerships, or what exactly are you doing with Frontpoint?
Yeah, so that's evolved too. The Frontpoint has historically been 100% affiliate driven in its marketing efforts since day one. And so in this world, the affiliates are largely affiliate review sites. So it's a little bit different. What I was doing primarily at LendingTree were large publishers who are arbitraging media spend against the LendingTree brand and driving consumers to their lead generation forms. Whereas most of what I manage right now is a combination of those affiliate review sites that are probably primarily buying non-branded security-related keywords. Most of my partners are actually SEO, so they're not buying keywords, but they're creating a ton of content.
Yeah.
And then it's just working, a relationship with these companies to where hopefully I'm the top company ranked. Frontpoint's the top company ranked on their review site, and if I'm not the top, I'm one of the top ones. And then it's just a relationship, in my case, primarily now on a CPA basis. So, where it's interesting, whereas from a compliance standpoint, LendingTree could no longer pay on the back end. They used to pay a success fee on a closed
Yeah.
loan.
Yeah.
And then regulations around that changed to where they went straight CPL. I have actually no CPL relationships at Frontpoint, and everything that I do is on a cost per acquisition basis, where I will pay partners based on the purchase and what we call activation, which is just, we're a DIY product. So a consumer receives it, installs it, activates it on their phone. That's a payable event.
Which is like a dream come true for a lead or brand, right? To be able to have that type of relationship or buying power,
Right.
that you can actually do that. Because I come across all kinds of brands that will go, well, we'll pay you if we close. Well, okay, but
Yeah.
these companies now is a little bit different with a company. They're still putting money in SEO and all this sort of stuff, and
Oh yeah.
their model is a little slightly different, but
Right.
so it's not quite like paying X dollars to Google and then not getting a return until 3
Right.
months, a month from now, whatever it may be. So it's maybe slightly different, but that is sort of the dream come true, where you can just pay on a per sale basis.
Yeah, I mean, it's the conversation that I have at the end of the day. CPA, CPL, it's just math, and
Yeah, yeah.
but at the end of the day,
Well, it's timing too. It's not just
it
math,
is.
but it's timing and liquidity for the advertiser, right?
It
I
is.
mean, it's cash
Absolutely.
flow.
And that's why, full disclosure, that's why the majority of my relationships now are SEO, because they're not arbitraging a media spend on the front end to that kind of longer tail
Yeah,
on the acquisition process. So, my deal structure does limit me, the types of companies that I can work with. The big SEM players out there aren't huge partnerships with me anymore, because they want to be paid on the CPL, on the cost per lead. But that's the decision Frontpoint has made as a company, and quite frankly, it's worked real well, because the company has pivoted successfully, unlike anything that I've ever seen before, where it saw the opportunities to. We've always kind of sat in between the big pro install guys like an ADT,
hmm,
and the DIY, the kind of simple and bare bones DIY companies like a Simply Safe. We've sat in the middle, because we're DIY, but we're we've got full service professional monitoring, and our professional monitoring is a little bit on the higher end from a pay scale and value scale. So we always kind of sat somewhere in the middle, and this continues that evolution, because it allows us to be an ADT, excuse me, and drive that consumer to a request to quote form, where it hits our call center, or they can go directly to an e-commerce platform that we have directly on our website and shop and buy directly, and never speak to a telesales rep, if that's the path that you want to go. So that evolution, I think, has been really, really great for the company.
yeah, and it's interesting because if you look back at LendingTree, right, when they used to do that closed loan fee, it really actually passes a lot of power over to it too. So it's not like it's completely out of balance, right? Even for your SEO guys that are driving the
Right.
traffic, if you're not closing deals, you best believe your listing's probably going to go down too,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Oh
so
yeah.
it does put everybody sort of in the same lane for driving revenue.
Yeah. There's no doubt. Both buyers and sellers goals are best aligned when there's a back end success.
Yeah,
Um, Especially if you're a lead generator, because LendingTree isn't, or any lead generator isn't going to be able to continue to be successful if their leads aren't generating whatever sales they're trying to transact toward. And so especially for a lead generator, it is, I think, a better model, but the federal government
Yeah,
felt.
I really, the only problem is, what'd you say, Kat? What'd you say?
I said the federal government felt differently.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so take mortgage out of the picture, right?
Yeah,
Put it in some other vertical. And I really like the model too, because I think it, like I said, obviously it lines the power between both the buyer and the seller to some extent. But if you can get a small fee up front for a lead and then take a larger back
yeah,
end, and then as a lead seller, now I'm really controlling who's getting those leads based on revenue as well.
yeah,
Because one of the problems, which you know quite well, is you can be selling a great quality lead to multiple people, and there's going to be guys that just are going to fail at it, and other guys are going to sit with the same lead,
yeah,
and that causes stress on the sales team, the marketing team, because who's having conversations with those people that
right,
don't know how to properly work their leads? You are. And of
right,
course, it's not how they work the leads, it's your leads are dog shit, and
right,
what you do is horrible, and all this
right.
other stuff. But meanwhile, there's a group of people that are being wildly successful with it because they know how to work leads. So I always wonder why. It goes back to, I think, that cash flow issue, right? Is as a lead seller, I'm putting money out there to drive traffic or even work with affiliates, whatever it may be, and that money is going to be paid out in a week or 2 weeks or 30 days. And if I'm not getting any money back from you, the lead buyer, like, obviously it's going to cause some problems.
Right.
But I'm surprised more people haven't gone, okay, well, I'll sell you this lead for $5 and then you give me $50 on a sale, or just minimize and try to balance that out in some way. But nobody's ever really done that since Lending Tree.
Everybody wants the other guy to take the risk.
Yeah.
So,
Well, there's no
that,
trust, right, on both sides. Just like I
yeah,
said, if I'm selling a lead to you, I have to have trust that you're going to actually be successful with it if there was some type of closed loan fee or CPA
right.
deal, and vice versa.
Well, and
Yeah,
that's where relationships come in. That's one of the things that I learned um, in the very early days, going back to Lower My Bills, is that you build these professional relationships so that you build that trust, so that my counterpart, if I'm at an aggregator and I'm selling to a brand, or if I am the brand like I am now, that my counterpart knows I'm going to do what I say I'm going to do. And
yeah.
it's really just as simple as that. And when you have that trust, then you can do those types of mutually beneficial deals. But yeah, it's tough. It's tough because, like I said before, the affiliate world is just black hats and white hats, and that's it.
Yeah. So you're doing mainly, they're driving traffic from those listing sites to your own page, I'm guessing, and then you collect the information on your pages.
Yep.
Are there any other channels that you guys, well, maybe rephrase the question. Are there any other channels that you see out there in the marketplace that seem to be successful? And what I mean by that is I think of calls. I think of, like you said, I think, text messaging, but although that's not quite a channel for driving leads, it's more of a, nurturing type of channel. But calls specifically, click to calls, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Are there other channels that, seem to be interesting?
Yeah, I mean, as a matter of fact, where I'm actually spending the majority of my time now in building relationships are actually reseller type of opportunities, where I'm partnering with companies that have their own call center and have their own data, and just are looking for more products to sell. And oftentimes what I find is these companies know their data better,
Yep.
and so they're going to have more success. Even though they have to learn a new product to sell, they're going to have more success selling a new product to their data than we may have with their data, because we don't know their data as well. And then there's other relationships too, cross sell type of relationships, where partnering with companies that are, I like to say, toiling in the same garden but not competing. So perfect example is like homeowners insurance or home warranty companies. And they already have relationships with these customers and can call them and offer them a great home security product, which is complementary to the products and services that they sell. And so I'm getting a great deal of scale and efficiency out of these types of relationships that frankly don't even ever hit my call center. It's easy to integrate and partner with these types of companies because we actually just use a version of our e-commerce platform that I mentioned before. So it's entirely web-based. There's no integration with Salesforce or anything, that's going to take a lot of time and money and development. It's really plug and play, and I can make these companies really, really successful with a completely incremental product suite to sell to their customers in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, that's interesting. And when I think the first thing that comes to my head is that back in the day when credit repair or credit reporting would always want to partner with the mortgage guys, right, on like
Right.
their landing page or whatever, thank you page type stuff, or even just remarketing to their database. And it seemed like it was always hard to get those brands to sort of shift a little bit from their own focus, right, which is their product, their brand,
Right.
to do something like that. But I know you're talking about a little bit different. You're talking about more of a call center operation that may be doing multiple campaigns or maybe doing some cost per action type of stuff on different
Yep.
campaigns, which is agnostic, right? They can do anything. But to the same point, is it hard to sort of get people to trust in that process right now, or are they usually pretty open to it?
I mean, it depends on the companies. There's definitely some companies that are like, you know what, we just want to sell what we do.
Yeah.
We're not looking to sell for anybody else. And then there's other companies that frankly understand, you know what, we're better at selling than you are. So you give me your product and I'll sell it. And you just pay me a commission.
Yeah.
And that's great too. I mean, I don't really have a preference per se, but I definitely am seeing more of these BPO, business process outsourcing companies, data companies. There's even, quite frankly, one of my best competitors has an agency reseller program, and there's a lot of those companies that are looking to diversify away from that company and sell a different type of product. And there's very strict requirements that some of these companies have, and they can't intermingle the data or anything, but they can set up a completely incremental business over there for me and replicate the success that they've had with this other security company with a completely separate data set. Like I said, the sky's the limit to that. I'm really excited about that aspect of the business, and we're growing that very, very quickly.
Yeah. Our mutual friend JT Benton and Brett Coffin, make a living hopefully off of creating these types of relationships, right? Bringing
Yep.
like-minded or like data or like targets together, and companies to sort of work in partnership. And it's interesting to see how companies are sort of evolving towards that, sort of teaming up
Yeah.
to some extent, and coupling products or services together to be
Well,
successful.
it's business 101, right? It's a
Yeah.
lot more expensive to generate a new customer than it is to sell additional products and services to a current customer.
Yeah.
And so that's simply what I offer is, hey, it's a really quick and easy product. It's a successful product. Our as a company, our net promoter score is fantastic. So if you're looking to sell an additional product and service, this is easy and this is great for you.
Yeah. So is your challenge, your number one challenge, scale right now?
That's a good question. I think scale isn't I think my number one challenge is finding companies that will operate within, strictly within a CPA, because admittedly that
Yeah.
business requirement that we've decided as a company to take on definitely excludes a certain
Yeah.
number of partnerships from my universe. So that's probably the biggest challenge, which again, it was the big reason why I've kind of shifted focus to these BPO type of relationships and agency types of relationships, because those have always kind of operated on a CPA basis, and the terms are really favorable for both of us.
My guess is you probably know exactly what's going to work and what's not going to work at this point in time, right? When you see a process and company and what they do, and you hear them and you listen to them speak, my
Yeah,
guess is you can identify what is likely going to work and what's likely not going to work probably within the first 5 minutes
yeah.
of talking to somebody. Having said that, if someone's listening, what is the type of process that does work for the CPA to fall into those, those numbers that you have partnerships that are working really well, they're making money, you guys are, those long-term partnerships. Who are those types of guys that make it successful?
I think the ones that know what they have. I mean,
Well,
it's all lead gen is just a mixture of, it's just right pricing intent. So, if I'm talking to some guys that, if they're really good at generating Facebook ads, and Facebook leads, and it's priced correctly, let's say I'm still in the CPL world, I'm going to pay a lot less for a Facebook ad than I will for a Facebook lead than I will for a Google lead. I mean, again, there's really no huge
yeah, but
size.
is it, so what I'm saying is it like a listing company that has a lot of diversity, in home services that usually does really well because they can sort of balance out the risk with you? Is it someone that's focused on SEO? Is it someone that is focused on social media, or is it about, is there sort of a profile out of curiosity? Hey, these guys actually do really well with this, with this.
Yeah. Okay. So I think the answer is, going back to what I originally said, is knowing what you do well. Nobody does it all well. I've
Yeah.
got a really good friend who is an exec at an agency that I've partnered with many times for many millions of dollars over the years. And the reality, and he's gonna hate if he hears this. I'm not gonna mention names, but I've tested all types of media with those guys,
Yeah.
and as great as they are and as smart as they are, email is what they do really well. And I haven't had the same level of success with other media types that they have. And, I've basically arrived at the conclusion that these guys will always be my email agency,
Yeah.
but they haven't really, I know they have with other brands, but
Yeah.
just in my personal experience, I haven't had a great deal of success with other types of media. So, I think there's certain types of companies that are really good at display advertising, really good at social, really good at email, really good at Google, but I don't think there's a company that does it all well.
Yeah. And I think you just
Everybody's got their
elaborated the
niche.
whole freaking the problem with, or not problem, the challenges with lead gen is that you can't just plug and play, right? I asked you specific, is there a profile that works? And it's a hard thing to answer because it's all over the place,
Yeah,
and it's a moving target to some extent. I'm sure that's probably what you experienced a little bit at a lending tree when you were even doing cost per lead type stuff. Is that, campaigns will ebb and flow and things will move around, and you're coming in on a Monday and there's going to be shit to do. And it's not like you can come in and know you're going to be just checking the numbers and going through the motion. There's always
yeah.
something
It,
happening,
it is never set it and forget it in
Yeah,
this
there's
industry.
never said, yeah,
Ever,
exactly. Which is disappointing.
ever. Well, it's
But
because
also makes it is what sort of keeps us coming back for more, because I'm sure deep down that is what you love about it, is that it is always changing, and it is always a deal. It's always something to optimize. It's always something to change or make better.
definitely,
And I when I look back, I look at those times while extremely stressful, sometimes, and the negativity you get from different campaigns and all this sort of stuff. But at the same time, that's kind of what gets you the blood going.
definitely.
It's like game day.
Yeah, I mean, listen, if anybody finds a stress-free job that they're
Yeah.
able to do to put food on the table for their family, let me know what that is,
Yeah.
because
Well,
they don't exist.
yeah, and Legion's hard, right? It's not,
Yeah,
and so I think, to try to articulate, I mean, I think there's, people out there that think it's supposed to be easy, and
Right.
maybe they just never spent a day in actually running those campaigns or doing those types of things, and they think that, oh, come on, this is easy stuff. Let's make this happen.
It's very very hard, and I found that out personally because as you know there was the 2 years between Lending Tree and Front Point where I actually tried the self-employed thing for a while, and it was both the most stressful and the most rewarding probably time of my professional life. But I just kind of I figured, all right, I built up this fire hose of traffic over
Yeah.
6 years at Lending Tree, and I can just take this fire hose and I can point it at any brand, and then I'll just set it and forget it. Right? I'll sit back and count the dollars. And what I found was there are so many components to a successful lead generation campaign, and it's not just media buying power, because you also have to be able to direct that media buying power at a form that converts from click to conversion at a really efficient rate and generate an offer that's attractive to the marketplace. The payouts are really strong, and there's just these numerous small components that all have to converge in a perfect storm to really create an offer that converts really really well for the brand, for the lead generation, for the publishing partners, the media partners. And that's really really hard to come by. I mean, I would say of over the 2 years, I probably had a few dozen different offers, and 4 or 5 of them stuck. I mean, it's a really, really small hit rate. And it was never an issue of volume, because, the people that I had come to trust and partner with over the years at Lending Tree, these were folks that collectively were generating 20, 30, 40,000 leads a day for me at certain points during my career. So volume has never been an issue, but replicating the efficacy of those campaigns that hit a form that converts, and you have the capacity to buy that on the buy side. I mean, all of those components are really really hard to line up.
Yeah, well, Front Point's lucky to have you over there, and anybody you work with is going to be lucky because your experience obviously is, I would say, unparalleled. I don't know of anybody
Oh,
that's been
wow.
at the top four, lead gen companies from a sales marketing standpoint, been all around,
uh,
have that kind of experience. So,
Kind of me to say. I usually put it differently in that I'm smart enough to realize I'm too stupid to learn anything new. So that's why I'm kicking around in this industry still.
well, like you can't, find the person that's perfected it,
Yeah,
and it's not going to happen. But well, listen, I've taken more than enough of your time for the day. I'll let you get back to work, but I appreciate it. It's good to catch up, man. I love
dude.
just kind of talking with you and learning what you're up to and just talking shop. So I appreciate it. We'll do it again.
I appreciated it. It was an honor for the invite, Mike, and glad nobody else was available, so we could do it.
You're top of the list, buddy. Always
So
will be. All right,
I
man. Thanks a
appreciate it.
lot, John. I
Yeah, thank
appreciate
you,
it.
Mike. See ya.